Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this very important Earth Day. As you probably noticed coming into the building, there is a lot of passion right now about the environment and conservation and how we can use our individual and collective influence to conserve and protect it and continue to do research on the Earth. Our speaker today has a very important role in UC San Diego's commitment to environmental protection and research. Dr. Kellie Uyeda is the Executive Director of the UC San Diego Natural Reserve System. She's been in this role since last summer, and previously she was at the Tijuana River National Estuarine Research Reserve, which is a very long name for a very long river, in various roles as a research scientist. She is a UC San Diego alum, earning a bachelor's in environmental systems. She then moved over to San Diego State, earning a master's in ecology and then her PhD in geography. Her dissertation was on spatial and temporal variation in biomass accumulation in Southern California's chaparral, which is something that's very important for anybody that lives in this region, thinking about wildfires and habitat and things like that. Dr. Uyeda has published research on a number of related topics, from high salt marshes, drought mapping, pine forests, along with several GIS-related projects, including looking at volunteer mapping through things like iNaturalist. So following this talk, we will be doing some raffle drawings for things that you walked past, and given the size of the audience, probably everybody will win something. So we have some reserve system passports, nature journaling books, and supplies. So stay for that, please. And please join me in welcoming Dr. Kellie Uyeda to the library.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction, Jenny, and thank you to all of you for being here. So I'm going to start with the beginning, the Natural Reserve System. So it all started in the 1960s with this guy here, Kenneth Norris. He was a new professor at UCLA, and as a grad student, he had this formative experience of having gone out to the desert to do research on the desert iguana out there. And he'd been going to the same field sites time after time, had started building an understanding of what was happening and what was happening through time. And he went out one time and saw that there were survey stakes, and he thought, oh, are they going to build a road through this or something? What's that going to mean for my field work? And this is from his book, his memoir. His next trip, it was just completely wiped out. Half his study area was vacant sand. There were bulldozers. It was just everything he'd worked on was gone. Of course, it wasn't any sort of, the land he was on didn't have any sort of protections. He was just on probably trespassing on private property. But he realized that he needed to have researchers needed to have these protected areas to be able to do their research.
Can you date his work? When was he working in the desert?
Oh, this is in the 1960s. So 1965 is when the Natural Reserve System started. So yeah, he was a new professor at UCLA, and shortly after he taught for many years at UC Santa Cruz. So one of the things that I learned in preparing for this talk is that this little tagline at the top here, "We are often the greatest adventure of our lives," is what he would loudly proclaim at the start of his student field trips. So he'd load up all the students onto a big old blue school bus and, start each field trip with, "We are often the greatest adventure of our lives," which I instantly recognized that catchphrase because it's on the signature line of my boss, Dr. Dick Norris, who is his son. He's a professor at Scripps. And so this sense of adventure, wonder in the natural world is something that, has propagated through the Natural Reserve System. So from 7 initial reserves, Ken Norris went out on a massive road trip, scoping out sites that would make good potential sites. And in 1965, they had just 7. It's now 42 across California. And the general idea here is, you know, since we're in a library, this library analogy makes perfect sense. But this is a library of ecosystems. So any sort of ecosystem you might want to learn about, the Natural Reserve has it. So if you need to do high altitude research, you might want to be at the White Mountain Research Center. If you want to be out in the desert and be able to stay overnight and do, you know, field trips, field excursions day after day, maybe you'll go out to the Steel Burnham Anza Borrego Desert Research Center. If you want to be on a remote island and do anything from intertidal to you know, post disturbance recovery of after you know, goat grazing, then maybe Santa Cruz Island Reserve is for you. So there's a great diversity of systems. These are all managed by different UC campuses, and they're available for use for both UC affiliates and non-UC affiliates. So these are the 4 UC San Diego reserve sites. So they're all within San Diego County. We are the most compact of all of the reserve systems. So all of our reserves are within about a 45-minute drive or so of each other. So Dawson Los Monos Canyon Reserve is up in the Vista, Carlsbad area. We have Elliott Chaparral Reserve out in the Scripps Ranch area off Pomerado Road. The Kendall Frost Mission Bay Marsh Reserve is out in Pacific Beach, Mission Bay area. And then Scripps Coastal Reserve is the one closest to campus here. It's easy walking distance off of Muir College. You can walk either all the way down to the Rocky Intertidal, or there's a mesa top, and I'll go in each one of these in a lot more detail. But before I go any further, I want to make sure to acknowledge the native land that we're on. So all of our reserves are within this Kumeyaay land, which stretches all the way through San Diego down to Baja California. Our Dawson Reserve is also within Luiseño land. And so these Indigenous, you know, tribal communities have been part of shaping the landscapes for thousands of years and continue to be an important part of management in these areas. So next, I'm going to go one by one, each of the reserves. So starting with Dawson Los Monos Canyon Reserve. This is the one up in Carlsbad. It's about my little thing is blocking the acreage amount of each one, but it's about 200 acres, 180 acres out here. And it is, as you can see here, intensely urban. There is urban development right up to the edge of everything. And this is a common theme with all of our reserves. You know, given that we're all within San Diego County, all of our reserves are quite urban. But it's this gorgeous riparian system. It has these mature coast live oaks. It has mature sycamore trees, just this gorgeous place to go for field trips and research. The history here is that it was originally, as I mentioned before, this Luiseño tribe used it as a travel route in between the mountains and the ocean, and it was also important as an acorn harvest site. In more recent history, Ida Bell Squires was born here on the family property in 1901, and she and her husband, Clarence Dawson, which is how it got the Dawson name, ran the family's cattle and horse ranch for many years out here. But Ida noticed that development was happening rapidly, and she wanted to preserve some of this land for the future to, you know, keep some open space. And so she started donating portions of her land to the UC system between 1965 and 1996. And at the time of her death in 1996, she had donated most of this reserve. And so this was one of the 7 original reserves that Ken Norris, when he traveled around looking for which places would make good reserve sites, this is one of the original 7. So here is what Dawson Los Monos Canyon looks like today. This is the little white outline is our, you know, reserve boundary. So you can kind of see where you are in terms of like Legoland, and the 78 is out there. So kind of orient yourself to where things are. Amy advertised this to the GIS folks, so I had to add a little bit of GIS, although it's cheater GIS. It's just the Landsat record that's on Google Earth. Anyways, this is starting in the 1980s, the development through time. So in the 1980s and through 90s, Dawson was still surrounded mostly by open space. But as time goes on, it turns out Ida knew what she was talking about in terms of the need to protect this space. Pretty much the only space that remains by the time we get to present time is the reserve boundary. So it's both a challenge and a great accomplishment, to have all this urban space around. It's problematic to deal with trespassing and, kind of urban issues. But it's amazing that the donors had the foresight to donate this land. So current research happening out here, we have some researchers looking at butterfly biodiversity. So they go out and walk the same paths time and time, on a monthly basis to see the change in butterflies through time at these set routes. One that's especially cool is a geographer. This is a group from SDSU Geography and some other organizations too that all came together to fly this drone flight. You can see the drone in the middle there. It's a LiDAR drone. So here's one example of the sort of imagery it produced. LiDAR sends out little light pulses to measure a 3D model of the surface of the ground. So here is a color version of the 3D model. It's hard to, it just kind of looks like a funny looking picture from this angle. So here's another version of the LiDAR 3D model produced. And if anyone's interested, Bruce is the student who worked on this. He just sent me the archive that's on Open LiDAR. So it's available for all future researchers to take a closer look at. But it's pretty cool to have this 3D model of our field station and surrounding area. So next we're on to Elliott Chaparral Reserve. This is the one in the Scripps Ranch area. 180 acres out here. And we have the best thing we have here, I'll just say, are the horned lizards. The horned lizards are so, so cute. The first several times I went out here, I saw horned lizard after horned lizard. The most recent time I was out here, I didn't see a single one. So I think it's a seasonal thing, and you got to catch them at the right time. But yes, the main takeaway here is that the horned lizards are very cute. But it's also this lovely chaparral, open space that adjoins Miramar, Marine Corps land. And so it's a much larger open space than it could be on its own. So, of course, along this northern boundary, we have a ton of development, right up to the edge. But on the southern boundary, it just extends all into open space. And that's how many of these reserves happen. We don't necessarily, the UC system doesn't necessarily own all the land that the research happens on, but having access to adjoining natural lands is really key. We have a weather station there that collects really high quality weather measurements. It's a great site. So here's some of the history. I don't have a lot on the Kumeyaay traditional usage, but I know yucca is a really important plant for them. And there's a lot of, in terms of like fiber usage and such. So the fact that there's lots of yucca there meant that surely there was at least some usage there. In the more recent history, it was a World War II training facility, named originally for Major General George F. Elliott. In 1960, it was decommissioned and absorbed into Marine Corps' Air Station Miramar. And in 1965, the UC system acquired 500 acres. And Mildred E. Mathias, who is a UCLA professor and a botanist, she was the one who advocated in particular is we should really make sure that we get Elliott. And so this is our only reserve that wasn't established right at the beginning. This one wasn't established until 1969, but still it's a quite long history. One of the cooler research projects out there is this work on pollinators by UCSD biology PhD student Jess Mullins. Her project is on variable precipitation and habitat fragmentation jointly impacts native bee assemblages. And these are all images taken by one of her collaborators during her research. Finally, onto Scripps, next onto Scripps Coastal Reserve. We still have one more after this. And this is the one that's very close walking distance to campus. Just, if you head basically west from Muir, you'll come across this quickly. And so we have both the upland area, which includes, this is the, road down to Blacks and this little mesa top with the loop. But also includes the entire San Diego Scripps Coastal State Marine Conservation Area. There's about 70 acres that are owned directly by the UC system. We have another about 19 acres that are licensed to the UC system that are owned privately, but we can go there for teaching and research. And then 930 acres within this state marine conservation area. And so this is a very diverse system, everything from sandy beach to subtidal, submarine canyon, to rocky intertidal, to coastal sage scrub, to maritime chaparral. It's really an amazing resource. And the Scripps Coastal Reserve has this very long history of usage by the Kumeyaay. There's even evidence of villages in what's now submarine canyons. Back when sea levels were lower, there were settlements out in, what's the open ocean now. More recently, it's been a marine research site since Scripps was founded in 1903. So this definitely has our longest history of usage. It was used for military uses in World War II. And again, my georectification is not perfect here, but you can kind of see what it was like. This is 1944. The main thing to see here is that the area where this little coastal lookout is now was basically just scraped clean. And so we've seen a really amazing recovery since this usage, as a military facility. And even the areas that are not just, my mouse will show where I am here, even areas that are not just completely scraped clean are all just basically these like non-native grassland. And so we've seen amazing recovery of native shrubs, especially in the last decade or so, but it's been, gradual through time that we've seen a really strong recovery post-disturbance here. And this also was one of the 7 original natural reserve system sites in 1965. So we have 3 out of the 7 original sites were at UC San Diego. So we have a really strong history in the creation of the natural reserve system. A few interesting things to highlight down here. Sea star wasting syndrome just came all across the Pacific coast in around 2014, like 2013 really to 2015. And so here I have some pictures I took back in the day when I was an undergrad in 2005. And again, one I took more recently in 2021. And this is like in the movies, you'd zoom in, enhance. It's might be a little too dim to see, but hopefully you can see that there's just a gazillion sea stars just all packed in here. And if you look at the magic, enhance now, there's nothing. And so this area has been monitored for many years now through this marine program, multi-agency Rocky Intertidal Network. So there's this monitoring effort across, this entire coastline. And so, this has been captured in the data. What's exciting though, this last year, I've been taking my coastal ecology field class out here. And in the last few years, we've seen like a single sea star, like the entire class of 16 students all looks, and we come away having seen one. This year, for the first time, we saw more than one aggregation of sea stars, more than one sea star at a time, and more than one, patch of them. So here's a couple of aggregations of sea stars seen by my students this year. another species, very tiny but very cute. So it's exciting to see, starting to see some recovery post sea star wasting syndrome. There's probably some complicated confluence of factors that contributed to this, but kind of all across the coast, they all just started dying. But what it's unclear yet is if they're all starting to come back, or if everywhere is seeing just these limited response. Another cool project we have out at Scripps Coastal Reserve is our trail camera to capture wildlife sightings. This pretty well captures what we see on the trail camera. Coyotes are well represented here. We see a lot of coyotes. We see, a handful of birds, a nice little hummingbird selfie there, and a hawk. This one, though, I was pretty impressed by. I sent out the trail camera before I was formally working with the natural preserve system. I just had a student who wanted to do an environmental systems internship and needed something close to campus. I'm like, I'll buy you a trail camera. Just put it out, Scripps Coastal Reserve, see what you find. And in the first few months, she found a bobcat, which I wouldn't have guessed that there was a bobcat this close to campus. In the full image, you can see like the cranes and construction in the background. And so it's really noteworthy that these spaces still exist and are, still supporting wildlife. They're supporting all sorts of wildlife, not just the big, charismatic, cute ones, but it's good to have the charismatic, cute ones too. All right, on to Kendall Frost Marsh Reserve, the fourth of our reserves. It's about 20 acres UC owned, and that's that boundary that you see there. Another 20 acres city owned, and that makes up this tiny little postage stamp of salt marsh. And these kids, by the way, that you see down in the corner singing, that's part of our Wander the Wetlands series, where people can actually get in the marsh and catch fish and take pictures for iNaturalist and release the fish back into the marsh. And if you're wondering what irresponsible parent would let their kids just walk out into the marsh with their clothes on and just like flood their boots, yeah, those are my kids. But it's just open to the public. Anyways, a little bit of the history of Kendall Frost Marsh. There's evidence of several Kumeyaay villages around Mission Bay, really important site for food, for culturally important materials. During in the post-World War II area, Mission Bay Park was created. And I put this just to show where we are. So here we are up in the corner of Mission Bay. A lot of people, when I tell them that I'm working at a salt marsh in Mission Bay, they say, wait, what's that? They've never heard of, such a thing existing. And then they especially don't know, as I didn't know when I was an undergrad, that all of Mission Bay used to not look like this. Mission Bay used to be this massive wetlands complex, and that it was through dredging and filling that it all was changed into a park. And it's a lovely park. I was just there this weekend, but it doesn't provide the important value that only a salt marsh can provide in terms of carbon storage and wildlife habitat value, nursery habitat for birds and such. So it's really important that this little tiny patch of salt marsh remains. So two donors that recognize the value of this area, Lena Kendall and the A.H. Frost Estate. They both separately donated parcels of land to create what is now the Kendall Frost Marsh. So they did this in 1952, well ahead of when the rest of the natural reserve system was created. But Scripps had been using this site since the 1940s or so. And so again, one of the 7 founding sites, one kind of noteworthy blip in their history is that mangroves were experimentally introduced in 1965, and then they spent decades trying to yank them out because they're not native to this zone. We might end up, with global climate change, we might end up seeing mangroves naturally migrating up here, but we'll wait until they come on their own. So they still periodically have a seedling come up that we still are yanking out. And this is Lena's granddaughter, Judith Monk. The photos provided by Judith's daughter, Edie Monk. And this is probably in the 1940s or so. And it shows just this really thick, I mean, it first off shows this, family using the space. That this family clearly valued the salt marsh. They were out there in a boat, using it. A lot of people at this time kind of thought of marshes as wasteland of, low value, that they were improving the land by dredging and filling it. They clearly enjoyed and appreciated it. And also the cordgrass, which is this grass in the image behind them, is so tall and so lively. It is not that tall, not that lively now. One of the exciting updates with Kendall Frost Marsh is that we have a new field station. It's been almost a year that it's been open, so it's not that new anymore, but it still feels very new to me. There was a very old, dilapidated 50-year-old trailer that was there before, so this is a huge improvement. It has a multi-purpose space, like kind of classroom space, and also a separate space for researchers to stay. So researchers can, spend some time here, gathering data out in the marsh, process their samples, and have a place to sleep and eat and everything too. So it's great to be able to support, a variety of uses. A little bit about kind of conservation concerns here. We have this federally listed endangered species, the Ridgway's rail. For any fans of birds out there, you might have seen it historically called the clapper rail. It is one and the same. It's just the taxonomic revision has made it now the Ridgway's rail. But this is an endangered species that only lives in marshes. And so, Mission Bay, of course, is not the only marsh to have been dredged and filled and, completely surrounded by urban development. And so this bird has had a hard time. And it needs to nest in this cordgrass that I mentioned before. This picture, you're probably thinking, well, that cordgrass looks great. What's the problem with the cordgrass? That's a picture I took from San Diego Bay, and having a particularly dense, lovely stand of Spartina. And so normally it would build these floating nests that are anchored by the vertical stems of the tall cordgrass, and at high tide, the whole nest goes up, and then at low tide, the whole nest goes back down. And so we do our best to replicate that. You'll notice this site where we have this nest is not dense cordgrass like the last pictures you've been seeing. But the entire thing is on this PVC hinge. And so it is connected to the ground with these little rebar staples. You can kind of see here. And so the whole thing goes up and down because it's on these, again, hollow PVC floats. So the whole thing floats up with high tide, and then it comes back down at low tide. And so this gets the birds in their, the right spot in the marsh, this place where they want to nest within the marsh. It helps to keep them away from predators, because predators know there's, tasty bird eggs in there. So we have a problem with feral cats and raccoons and such. So the more out in the marsh they are, the safer they can stay. And we've also been able to, the nice thing about putting out these nesting platforms is you have a place to attach a camera if you want. And so this is some of the older footage. There's about 4 cameras that are out there right now from San Diego Bird Alliance. These are some footage from the earliest generation of cameras. But it's pretty cool to see, you're able to both determine if you have nesting success. So these are the little chicks. And this is either mom or dad. They're not sexually dimorphic. They, males and females look essentially the same. So, but both mom and dads, stay with the chicks. But I could sit here and watch the little chickies forever, but they're pretty cute. Maybe we will, because I can't advance. All right. Another cool project I want to highlight here is the Climate Science Alliance's program, Here Are Names. So they designed these signs in Kumeyaay, English, Spanish, and Latin, the scientific names. And then each sign has both this illustration, a beautiful illustration of the native plant, and also a QR code so that you can hear the Kumeyaay pronunciation. And we have about 10 of these, 10 species on a little small upland loop. But we were the very first site in San Diego where they put these up. So it was an honor to be part of this effort. It's a collaboration with Climate Science Alliance, Tipe Native Warriors, and then of course UC San Diego. And you can head to that website if you want to hear the recordings, or you can just search, here are names, Climate Science Alliance. Another cool effort, there's a lot going on at Kendall Frost, is this water level monitoring by UC Davis's Coastal Oceanography Group. So they have this larger effort to document coastal flooding. And so they put out this water surface elevation sensor. So it actually has water surface elevation and also temperature. But you can see how high, the highest tides get. I was a little disappointed after they deployed it to realize that you can only see the highs, the lows are cut off because the marsh doesn't drain all the way at that point. So we might consider moving it to a place where you can get the lows too, but for coastal flooding, you care more about the highs than you do the lows. So anyways, there's a QR code there if you want to try to scan it and that's a little bit harder to just Google to find. And then marsh coring activities. So we just recently sent out a group to do this marsh coring to understand the history of the marsh through pollen samples. So you get different pollens, tiny little pollen grains depending on which species were most common at that time. So the whole marsh is, just full of layers. So if you go down through the marsh, it's like a little time machine. You get to see what's happening through time. And of course, understanding carbon storage, salt marsh is really important for as a place to sequester carbon. So here's how it works. You smash down the core, and once it's down into the marsh, then ratchet it back up, suck it out, and then, cut the core and then take it back to the lab for processing. But the marsh is especially good for carbon storage because, you wouldn't think like everything's so low to the ground, how much biomass could there possibly be there? But when you have a tree or a shrub, out in terrestrial environments, and that tree or shrub dies, everything just breaks back down, as it loses leaf litter, everything is, still being released into the atmosphere. But in the salt marsh, everything is getting gradually, it's either below ground, biomass, or it's being covered by sediment that comes in. And so this, when the biomass gets trapped below ground, it doesn't break down and it gets stored in this long-term, carbon storage. So salt marsh is incredibly important. We as a society are starting to recognize this and starting to make, put a priority on restoring these salt marshes. And there's an effort in place to the Rewild Coalition, led by San Diego Bird Alliance, has this effort to rewild Mission Bay, essentially to expand the salt marsh to go, well beyond Kendall Frost Marsh. Other efforts across the UC San Diego Natural Reserve System, we have the Roy Little Fellowship. So we have a donor who's provided funds for 4 students. We have a 5th ESA student shown here too, but they are work study students that are able to, both, earn an income by working with the natural reserve system and get exposure to all the diverse activities we do. They mostly do outreach activities, but they're able to see, imagine themselves in a career in the natural sciences. One of the students in particular, Miriam, shown down here, is working on digitizing our herbarium, which is a collection of pressed plants samples. And so here she is. I wish this was our herbarium, but we're visiting San Diego State and this one to digitize all of our samples so that people from across the world can find our specimens and understand, which species were present at different points in time in each of our reserves. And then we have a bunch of we have so many activities. So I'm going to just go through these one by one, and I'll, not too far from taking questions. But first off, starting closest to campus, we have these Scripps First Saturday hikes and weekly weeding efforts. So on the first Saturday of each month, so the next one is Saturday, May 3rd, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., we have docent-led hikes of this upland, the mesa or knoll portion of the reserve. And then every Friday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., excluding like campus holidays or if it's raining, or, super muddy, adverse weather conditions, we're out there every Friday pulling weeds. So if you want to just show up, you're always welcome to come show up and pull some weeds. We also have Wander the Wetlands events, the second and fourth Saturdays, also from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Then these are at Kendall Frost Marsh Reserve, co-hosted by San Diego Bird Alliance and UC San Diego Natural Reserve System. You can definitely just show up, and recommend you showing up to check it out. But there's also opportunities to be a docent. So this is a docent-run program, and so we can't do it without the support of our docents. We have a docent training program that we're working on developing. So another opportunity. The most immediate opportunity, though, is this Saturday. In collaboration with the San Diego Bird Alliance, we're doing a bio blitz at Kendall Frost in the morning. So this is the normal Wander the Wetlands event, but it's the City Nature Challenge on iNaturalist. How many people have heard of the City Nature Challenge or iNaturalist? Some people. Okay. So the idea is cities across the world all compete to see who can document the most biodiversity within this long weekend of Friday through Sunday. And so we're going to try our best to get all the species we can. Last year, San Diego wasn't even close. We had like 2,000 species, and it was not anywhere near enough. The winner had like 5,000 species. So we've got to up our effort. But the salt marsh is a great place to do that because there's lots of species that you only find there. You don't find anywhere else. So if you want to see any of these, great. I'm a plant person, which is why I have 2 salt marsh plants and then 1 bird. Yeah, great place to collect your iNaturalist observations. This is a kind of open, come for as long as you want, leave whenever you want kind of activity. But then in the afternoon, we have another activity. We're collaborating with the Natural History Museum at Elliott Chaparral Reserve. And this is especially rare because you don't get a chance, we don't have events open to the public at Elliott regularly. I'm working on it, but there's a lot to juggle. Anyways, from 2 to 4, we're going to be there. I can't promise you're going to see a horned lizard, but you might. There's a chance. This, you do have to sign up in advance. So if you scan the QR code really quick, you can probably also find it if you search for City Nature Challenge San Diego. The Natural History Museum has a listing of all the events that they're offering, all throughout San Diego. But there's still a few. I checked the registration before this talk. There's still a few spots left. And there are so many other events. I was running out of slide space to put them all separate. This one in the middle, I especially want to highlight the Mosquito Marsh Mission. Every second and fourth Thursday, there's an opportunity to participate in local research and get a chance to get out in the marsh, which normally we don't have the public out like in the marsh itself. Even on Wander the Wetlands, it sounds like we just let people roam free, but no, you still have to stay like in a relatively constrained area. So it's an opportunity to get out, be involved in local research. It's Noah Rose's lab here at UCSD in biology that's leading this effort. But in addition, our spring research symposium, I gave you just a little taste of some of the different types of research projects that are going on, but there are so many more. We have 19 researchers signed up to present posters and lightning talks. So, this is just the small taste of what the great research that is supported at the Natural Reserve System. So come out Tuesday, May 20th, if you're interested in that. We're also about to have, also in May, an art and wellness event, partnering with San Diego Bird Alliance again and Tide, crafting organization. So lots of great opportunities to experience marsh, experience art. The big event that I always like to promote is Love Your Wetlands Day. The next year, it's going to be on Saturday, February 7th, 2026. You can find out more, loveyourwetlands, lywd.ucsd.edu. But It is so much. It started just as like cleaning up the marsh, cleaning up trash in the marsh, working on the Ridgeway rail rafts and such. But we just celebrated the 20th anniversary, and it is so many things. It's local environmental organizations come, set up booths, plein air painting. We have talks by local scientists. I had a mariachi band this last year. We partner with Kumeyaay Community College to make these. They provide the instruction on how to make these tule boats. They have to bring in materials from offsite, and the people assemble them during the event, and then they go check to see if they float. Last few years, they all floated. It's great. Um, so it's a great family friendly, bring your family, bring your friends, great event. Finally, ways to get involved, various groups. First off, students, come volunteer. You heard some of the opportunities we have. Visit, just, hang out, visit us during our open hours. We have work study eligible positions that are open right now. So if you go on Handshake, you'll see those opportunities. I teach a coastal ecology class, ENVR 120, where we just go on field trips every week. It's pretty awesome. And this year, since now I'm in charge of the natural reserve system, I made it all natural reserves. So it's pretty fun. I think so, at least. It's fun for me to teach, at least. But it's not the only class that uses the natural reserves. There's other classes. So, find an ecology class at UCSD. But better yet, ask your instructor if you can go on a field trip for any sort of class. I mean, maybe not like your basic math class, but any sort of extension you can make, writing or poetry or I could see we have some computer scientists that are doing research out in the reserve. There's lots of opportunities. Grad students, the Mildred E. Mathias Graduate Student Research Grant Program provides up to $3,000 in funding for travel and other expenses related to doing research in the reserves. So consider applying for that. For researchers and instructors from any institution, again, it doesn't have to be UC San Diego, we offer an opportunity to deploy your field equipment in a secure environment. These areas are closed to the public, and so it's a good place to deploy field equipment. We have weather stations at both Dawson and Elliott. We're hoping to get one soon at Kendall Frost. Of course, take your class on a field trip. You can send your students to our reserves during your open hours for like extra credit or whatever you want. It's a good place for independent student projects. We can provide access for individual students to come and, study these systems. I'm especially interested again in classes that have not traditionally used the reserves. So if I can, branch out more into getting literature classes or computer science classes to come out and visit, that would be great. And their main kind of appeal of using the natural reserve system, other than, believing in this mission of teaching, research, and public service, is that it's easy to use a reservation system to book visits across all 42 reserves. We all use the same reservation system. So researchers can and do multi-reserve applications. Finally, both for volunteers and potential donors, ways to get involved. Becoming a Wander the Wetlands docent, I mentioned a little bit previously, is a great way to get involved. Of course, you want to check out how the program works a few times first. Volunteering at Love Your Wetlands Day. Supporting us through a financial gift or your time or a talent. Maybe you're a great photographer and want to volunteer to photograph our events, would be amazing. And of course, there's a lot of cool things. We get support from the university, but there's a lot more cool things that we could do if only we had a little more money. So always interested in donations. And yeah, any way that folks want to partner with us to support our mission of research, teaching, and public service. Here are a couple ways to stay connected. We have a monthly newsletter that you can subscribe to on the left there, and on the right is our Instagram page. For those of you who are Insta users, I have the students run this Instagram page for me, although I'm also an Instagram user these days. I'm keeping up with the modern age. Here's all of us at the Natural Reserve System. As I mentioned earlier, Dick Norris at Scripps is our faculty director. I'm the executive director. Clarissa Rodriguez is our reserves manager. Sean Smith is our reserve stewards. And the three of us, Clarissa, Sean, and I, we are the only full-time employees in all of the reserve system. We have our great faculty advisors. Each reserve has a faculty advisor, but they're all professors that have other busy obligations to keep them occupied. So yeah, it's definitely a joint effort across biology and Scripps and everyone that kind of works together to make this happen. We're within the Office of Research and Innovation. All right. And with that, thank you so much for your attention. Please check us out, nrs.ucsd.edu. That's our full website. My email is kuyeda@ucsd.edu. My cards are out there. Feel free to grab some of the flyers and such too. But with that, I will take any questions.
So I know it seems a little awkward because it's a small group, but we are recording this on Zoom for possible putting online, so if you could use that.
Several months ago, the Harrison archives were premiered at the Mandeville. Are your students taking advantage of that wonderful resource?
No, I can you share more about the
I
program?
have some photos of which I can show you.
yeah.
And the person who curated the entire site exhibition.
Yeah,
That's
that'd be great.
brilliant. She took 5 years in going back and looking at, from the use of data from the Himalayas and snow melt to what San Diego looked like and how local people ignored it, and we're still trying to find how it drains into your salt marsh and all the obliteration of natural, should we call it protection of coastal systems.
Yeah,
Be happy to talk to you further.
that's great. Yeah, let's chat later.
I was gonna ask, how many reserves have you been able to go to? Have you gotten to all 42?
No.
No, not yet. Okay.
So I have been to Santa Cruz Island Reserve. In grad school, I had a friend who was going there to study bishop pines, and she mentioned that she needed some help, and I said, pick me. Although you can also go, so I've stayed at the field station. You can also go camping there with the National Park Service, so you don't have to go there with, the Natural Reserve System. Sedgwick at UC Santa Barbara, they have a lovely facility, and those, I believe, are the only two. I went to our management meeting at Blue Oak Ranch Reserve, which is also lovely in like the Berkeley area. But I've been told that I should, as part of my job, go on a road trip to see as many of them as possible. So I hope to do that soon. I think it's safe to say we have enough for everyone. We have these little passport books that have a page for each one of the reserves and a place to get a stamp when you visit each one.
Hi, my name is Ileana. Did you have a map of those reserves? I might have missed it.
Oh, yeah.
If you wouldn't mind pulling that up.
Yeah.
And then how closely is your partnership with California State Parks? Like, how often do you all meet at all, or what's that relationship like?
Yeah, so within the system, sorry, I probably didn't have to go
And I
back
ask this
through.
because with thinking of sort of changes on the federal level and federal, parks, but
Mhm.
that's sort of driving my question.
Yeah. So our collaboration so far, so I can speak first because I know directly the National Park Service. We collaborated with the National Park Service to do the tide pool, the Rocky Intertidal monitoring. So the same folks who monitor Cabrillo would come to Scripps Coastal Reserve. We're gonna partner with them more closely. We'll probably take over some of that in future years due to their budget issues. But that's been a longstanding partnership. I I want to do more with Scripps Coastal Reserve and state parks because Torrey Pines State Natural Reserve is just to the north and it is way more diverse than Scripps Coastal Reserve. And I think a big part of it is because it was scraped clean, in World War II. And so I think historically there would have been much higher biodiversity that was lost. And so I think it'd be cool to reintroduce some of the seeds, obviously with state parks permission and with the appropriate, environmental considerations, but to use that as a seed source because it is so close to it. I have many close colleagues. I worked at the Tijuana Estuary for many years, and that's a joint program between state parks and Fish and Wildlife and other, the county and such, and NOAA. And so I'm used to working with a lot of different agencies, and I hope to have tighter collaborations. Other reserves, though, like the desert, this one, the Anza-Borrego Desert Research Center, they are immediately adjacent to state park land. And so their researchers, when they go out to do research, they stay overnight at the field station, and then they're heading out to research sites that are on state parks land. So they have especially close collaboration.
You talked about funding a little bit. Are you focused at all on the Proposition 4 funding that was approved by voters and it's coming down for availability?
Yeah, I just signed up for a Prop 4 webinar today. Yes, I'm very, very interested in Prop 4 funding. The thing that I'm eyeing it most for right now is at Elliott Reserve. We have a ton of eucalyptus trees that we get complaints from the neighbors of, being a fire hazard. And I would love to see it be native chaparral and not eucalyptus trees. And so I'm eyeing that. That could be a nice tie-in for, climate resilience, wildfire reduction, risk reduction, and also restoring native species. But at Kendall Frost, there's also this, huge need. So yeah, I'm still eyeing the best strategy for making good use of those funds.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have one more, and then I'll do the raffle, and we can chat while we're folks can move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly, for this. And I'm curious in terms of the diversity of research that happens on all of the stations. Do you think that there are certain reserves that are maybe understudied or sort of just even within San Diego or across the entire system?
Yeah, so they actually each year they collect stats from all of these reserves and they plot them in terms of usage for research. They make these cool triangle plots. Maybe I should have showed here. Oh, sorry, I'm waving my hands around too much. These cool little triangle plots that have research, teaching, and public service, and they show where each reserve tends to fall. And so the reserves are all different. Some reserves have mostly public service, which is like K through 12 education or docent-led hikes and stuff like that. And others are really heavy on the research. You can't see in this little visualization what type of research they're doing. But just at that most basic level, every reserve is a little different in terms of how they balance those three parts of the mission statement. But yeah, we collect, all across all 42 reserves. We collect every project that happens on the reserve. We know what it's about and, what they're doing, and track all of that to track publications and understand what people are doing with the reserves.
Okay, thanks so much for coming, everybody. Feel free to help yourself to a passport and
I have no excuse.
certainly enjoy all the take advantage of all the reserves have to offer. This is a wonderful.